Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be continuing our read through of this book called On This Day, A History of the World in 366 Days. And this time we're going to read through the month of November. So if you have a November birthday, let me know down in the comments what your favorite historical event was that happened on your birthday. So we are starting off on November 1st in 1512, a spectacular sealing. The sealing of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, Italy, was officially opened. Italian painter Michelangelo had spent 4 years painting frescoes of scenes from the Old Testament of the Bible across the 5,000 square foot ceiling. 2014, Day of the Dead. During the annual Day of the Dead festivities in Mexico, more than 500 women came together in Mexico City to set a world record for the greatest gathering of women dressed as La Catrina, the celebration's symbolic female skeleton figure. 1938, Kahlo Exhibition. The first solo exhibition of Mexican painter Frida Kahlo opened at the Julian Levy Gallery in New York City to rave reviews from art critics. Also on this day in 1478, the Spanish Inquisition was established by Catholic monarchs King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who used it to find those who did not believe in Christianity. 1755, tsunami waves and local fires caused by the Great Lisbon earthquake devastated the capital city of Portugal, leading to huge loss of life. And in 1994, the first World Vegan Day was celebrated to bring attention to veganism. And born this day in 1990, Simone Giertz, Swedish inventor. Her inventions include a robot that applies lipstick. She demonstrates them to her fans on her YouTube channel. Next, we have November 2nd, 2000, Space Residence. The first long-term residents of the International Space Station arrived for a 4-month mission. The 3 astronauts made themselves at home by turning on the lights and joining a communications link with mission control. 1785, late fees. 2 library books borrowed by U.S. President George Washington from the New York Society Library were due back on this date, but were never returned. By 2010, the late fees totaled a staggering $300,000. My goodness, George. In 2012, talking elephant. Some news agencies around the world reported that an elephant named Koshik at Everland Zoo in Yongin, South Korea, could make human sounds by placing his trunk in his mouth. The animal could supposedly recreate 5 words: Annyeong, hello; Anja, sit down; Anya, no; Nuo, lie down; and Joa, good. Also on this day in 1936, the British Broadcasting Corporation launched the world's first high-definition TV service in London, UK. In 1988, an early computer malware named the Morse worm was released over the internet to disable computer systems, resulting in criminal charges against its U.S. inventor Robert Morse. You probably shouldn't name your malware after yourself if you don't want to get caught. And in 2017, scientists revealed the discovery of a secret chamber inside the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Born this day in 1966, David Schwimmer, U.S. actor. He rose to fame as Ross Geller in the TV show Friends, and later provided the voice of Melman the giraffe in the Madagascar movies. Next is November 3rd, 1915, Caribbean Heroes. The British West Indies Regiment was set up to create a support regiment during World War I. These volunteers from British colonies in the Caribbean helped Britain's war effort in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. In 1975, tennis ace. U.S. tennis player Chris Evert became the first person to receive the #1 ranking from the Women's Tennis Association. She remained in the top spot for 25 weeks. In 1911, Chevrolet founded. U.S. car manufacturer Chevrolet was founded. In 1912, it released its first car, the Chevrolet Series C Classic 6, which would challenge Ford's dominant Model T. Also on this day in 1838, the Times of India, the world's largest circulated English-language daily newspaper, published its first edition. In 1954, the epic monster movie Godzilla was released to packed cinema audiences in Japan, becoming an instant box office smash. In 1973, U.S. Space Agency NASA launched Mariner 10, the first space probe to reach Mercury. Born this day in 1900, Adolf Dassler, German cobbler. He founded the sportswear company Adidas, which grew into a global business empire. That is how we pronounce it in the United States. I know that's not how it's pronounced in many other places. In America, we say Adidas. 1949, Anna Wintour, British-born U.S. journalist, the editor-in-chief of the U.S. magazine Vogue. She's recognized as an influential fashion icon and media powerhouse. Next is November 4th, 1879, cash register. U.S. inventor James Jacob Ritty patented the first cash register. It was designed to look like a clock with numbers representing dollars instead of hours. It's interesting. 1961, clever chimps. British primate expert Jane Goodall realized that chimpanzees could make tools like humans. She made this breakthrough discovery while observing 2 chimpanzees using branches to remove termites from mounds. 1737, oldest opera house. The Teatro di San Carlo was inaugurated in Naples, Italy, financed by King Charles VII of Naples. It remains the oldest continuously active opera house. I think I have hot sauce on my finger. Oh my gosh, look at that. Look at all the little... 1 second. Oh me. That's a lot of hot sauce. Yuck. Sorry about that. It's gone now. What can I say? I love my hot sauce. Also on this day in 1847, chloroform was found to be an effective anesthetic for medical operations, following research by Scottish physician James Young Simpson. 1952, the Kamchatka earthquake in Russia triggered tsunami waves that reached the islands of Hawaii more than 3,100 miles away. And in 2001, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone, premiered in London, UK. It was the first of many Harry Potter films. Born this day in 1993, Elizabeth Seitz, German gymnast. She won a bronze medal at the 2018 Artistic Gymnastics World Championships and has created her own tricky twist called the Seitz. Next is November 5th. In 1605, it's Bonfire Night. The Gunpowder Plot failed to set off explosives hidden under the English Parliament in London, which were intended to kill King James I. The government eventually made this day an annual celebration of the plot's failure, with bonfires and fireworks. 1940, the longest-serving president. Franklin D. Roosevelt became the only U.S. president to be elected for a 3rd term in office, ultimately serving a total of 12 years and 4 terms. An amendment to the Constitution was later passed so that a president could serve a maximum of 2 terms. 2007 screenwriter strike. When discussions with studio representatives failed to agree on a better deal for royalty payments, nearly 12,000 screenwriters staged a strike in Hollywood, protesting outside film studios. How interesting that that happened this year as well. Also on this day in 1811, legend has it that Catholic priest José Matias Delgado rang the bells of the Church of La Merced San Salvador in El Salvador to mark the launch of the country's independence movement. 2013, India launched the Mars Orbiter mission, with the Mangalyaan probe arriving in the orbit of Mars almost a year later. And in 2019, the scientific journal Bioscience published an article warning that global warming is causing an emergency on Earth. It was signed by more than 11,000 scientists. Born this day in 1984, Eliud Kipchoge, Kenyan long-distance runner. At the 2018 Berlin Marathon, he ran the 26.2-mile stretch in just over 2 hours and 1 minute. Wow. In 1988, Virat Kohli, Indian cricket player. He captains the national team and is one of the best batsmen in India. Next is November 6th, 1991, burning oil. The last burning oil well in Kuwait was put out after about 700 oil wells blazed for 10 months. They had been lit by Iraqi military troops at the end of the Gulf War. 1869, American football. The first game of a new sport called American football was played between Princeton and Rutgers colleges in New Jersey. It started out as a combination of soccer and rugby, but developed into its own game, becoming the nation's most popular sport. In 1913, jailed abroad. Indian lawyer Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, known later as Mahatma Gandhi, was arrested for leading a march of thousands of Indian miners and their families in South Africa. They were protesting peacefully against a tax on workers, which was abolished as a result. Also on this day in 1975, the Green March, a demonstration by 350,000 Moroccan people, began. They crossed Morocco's border into the Spanish-occupied region of the Sahara and called for the land to be returned. In 1998, the journal Science reported that U.S. biologist James Thompson had removed multiple stem cells from a human embryo. Stem cells can grow into any type of cell in the body and can potentially help with treating many disorders. Born this day in 1814, Adolphe Sax, Belgian musician. He invented the saxophone, a brass woodwind instrument which would transform jazz music. And in 1988, Emma Stone, U.S. actor. She's played a variety of characters in Hollywood movies, including Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man. Next is November 7th, 1905, remote control. The Telekine, the earliest example of a machine that could control a distant object wirelessly, like a remote control, was demonstrated by Spanish inventor Leonardo Torres y Quevedo in Bilbao, Spain. 1492, Einstein meteorite. A 280-pound meteorite fell to Earth, leaving a deep hole in a wheat field near the village of Enschsheim in France. It is the oldest meteorite with an exact recorded date of impact. In 1861, the Melbourne Cup. A crowd of 4,000 people watched the first ever race of the Melbourne Cup at the Flemington Racecourse in Melbourne, Australia. This competition is now an annual event. Also on this day in 1885, The final spike of the Canadian Pacific Railway was banged into place, completing the new transcontinental railroad route. 1907, Mexican hero Jesus Garcia drove a burning train full of dynamite a safe distance away from the mining town of Nacozari de Garcia before it exploded. Wow, very brave. In 2019, for the first time, scientists observed the solar system's plasma shield, a protective bubble around it that stops high levels of cosmic radiation from entering. Born this day in 1867, Marie Curie, Polish physicist. She won 2 Nobel Prizes for her pioneering work on the discovery of new elements and understanding radioactivity. Next is November 8th, 1895, using X-rays. The first X-ray scan, produced by German physicist Wilhelm Röntgen using electromagnetic radiation, showed his wife's Bertha's hand. This invention enabled doctors to look inside the human body. 2016, Trump's term. Republican Donald J. Trump was elected president of the U.S. when he beat the Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton in the race for the White House. He served 4 years as president. And in 2020, giraffe under protection. A rare white giraffe in Kenya was fitted with a tracking device on one horn to monitor its whereabouts after its family was killed by poachers. Also on this day in 1519, Spanish soldier Hernán Cortés arrived in the city of Tenochtitlan in modern-day Mexico, where he was greeted by the Aztec Emperor Montezuma II. 1644, the Shunxi Emperor, a monarch of the Qing dynasty, was enthroned in Beijing as the first Qing emperor to rule over China. And in 1939, Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler survived an assassination attempt when a bomb exploded in a Munich building after he had already departed. Born this day in 1656 is Edmund Halley, English astronomer. Halley expanded scientific knowledge of comets and worked out that Halley's Comet, Edmund Halley. Halley's Comet, the famous comet named after him, orbited the sun every 76 years or so. Now his name's familiar, now that I'm pronouncing it right. Next is November 9th. In 1620, Pilgrim Fathers. A group of 102 people sighted land at Cape Cod on the North American continent from aboard the ship Mayflower. The travelers, later known as the Pilgrim Fathers, had set out from Plymouth, England, looking for a better life and religious freedom. And in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. 5 days after 500,000 people in East Berlin staged a protest at the ban on entering West Berlin, a restless crowd of thousands pushed through the border gates and began tearing down the Berlin Wall. Communism had begun losing its stronghold in Eastern Europe. Also on this day in 1938, across Germany, Nazis damaged Jewish schools, businesses, and synagogues, smashing their windows, and arrested 30,000 Jews. This violent anti-Semitic campaign was known as Kristallnacht, meaning the night of broken glass. In 2016, the Sub-1 Reloaded became the fastest robot to solve a Rubik's Cube puzzle in 0.637 seconds. Wow. At an electronics fair in Munich, Germany. Not even 1 second it can solve a Rubik's Cube. And in 2020, the Virgin Hyperloop, a system of traveling in a pod within a vacuum tube at high speed, carried its first passengers in Nevada. Born this day in 1984 is Delta Goodrem, Australian singer and actor. Her first album, Innocent Eyes, is among the best-selling Australian albums of all time. I like Delta Goodrem. Next is November 10th, 2011, extinct rhino. Africa's western black rhinoceros was declared extinct in the wild by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Poaching had wiped out this vulnerable species. 1958, the Hope Diamond. U.S. diamond merchant Harry Winston donated the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Discovered in a mine in India in the 17th century, this stone is one of the world's most recognizable jewels. In 2005, telescopic Titan. The Southern African Large Telescope near Sutherland, South Africa began operating. The largest telescope in the southern hemisphere, it attracts astronomers from around the world because it faces no light pollution in its remote location at an altitude more than 5,000 feet above sea level. Also on this day in 1903, U.S. inventor Mary Anderson received the patent for her invention, the windshield wiper. And in 1969, the children's TV show Sesame Street was first shown by the National Educational Television Network in the U.S. Born this day in 1843, Martin Luther, German monk. He stood against the corrupt practices of the Roman Catholic Church and helped kickstart the Protestant Reformation. And in 1960, Neil Gaiman, British author. He's a prolific writer of popular graphic novels and books, including Sandman and Good Omens. Neil Gaiman is my #1 favorite author of all time ever. He is fantastic. If you've never read a Neil Gaiman book or read any Sandman, his graphic novels, he's incredible. Next is November 11th, 1942, fighting in Egypt. During World War II, the Second Battle of El Alamein ended, with the Allies defeating Axis forces at El Alamein in Egypt. This marked a turning point in the war as German forces began to surrender to the Allies in northern Africa. 1918, war is over. World War I ended on this date, the 11th day of the 11th month, when Germany signed an armistice with the Allied forces. Every year on this day, known as Armistice Day, people wear poppies and observe a 2-minute silence to remember the soldiers who died in the conflict. In 1926, Route 66. The famous highway Route 66 in the U.S. was completed, spanning 2,448 miles from Chicago to Los Angeles. Road signs were put in place a year later to mark the route for the ultimate American road trip across the West. Also on this day in 2017, the Louvre Abu Dhabi opened in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, a result of the first partnership between France and the UAE. It soon became the most visited museum in the Arab world. Born this day in 1914, Daisy Bates, Black American activist and newspaper publisher. She campaigned against racial segregation using her newspaper, the Arkansas State Press. And in 1974, Leonardo DiCaprio, U.S. actor and environmental activist. He starred in many popular Hollywood movies such as Titanic, The Aviator, and Inception. Next is November 12th, 1859, High Flyer. At the Cirque Napoleon in France, daredevil acrobat Jules Léotard first performed a flying trapeze act. He later invented and gave his name to the leotard, a stretchy, tight-fitting outfit worn by gymnasts. 1894, box kite flight. Australian Lawrence Hargrave proved that a machine heavier than air could fly. He joined 4 large box kites, his own invention, to a sling seat, floated 16 feet above the ground, anchored by piano wire. The 1966 space selfie. U.S. astronaut Buzz Aldrin took the first space selfie outside the spacecraft on the Gemini 12 mission. These spacewalks paved the way for the first moon landing. Also on this day, 1956, the biggest iceberg on record, larger than Belgium, was spotted off Antarctica by a U.S. Navy ship. 1970, the Bola tropical cyclone, the most lethal ever, hit East Pakistan, which is modern-day Bangladesh, and West Bengal, India, killing at least 500,000 people. And in 1980, the NASA probe Voyager 1 made its closest approach to Saturn and took detailed images of the planet's rings. Born this day in 1980, Ryan Gosling, Canadian actor and musician. He won a Golden Globe Best Actor award for his role in the musical film La La Land. Next is November 13th, 1946, Let It Snow. The first artificial snow was produced in Massachusetts after a plane dropped ice crystals into a natural cloud. Unfortunately, the snow evaporated before it could hit the ski slopes below. 2020, statue in a sewer. A bust dating from 300 BCE of the ancient Greek god Hermes was found in a sewer in Athens, Greece. The sculpture was in good condition despite its murky surroundings. 1858, Big Ben bongs. The gigantic bell, now known as Big Ben, struck its first notes in a test exercise. Made for the new tower beside the Palace of Westminster in London, UK, its booming chimes attracted quite a crowd. Also on this day, 1956, segregation on buses in Alabama was declared illegal by the U.S. Supreme Court, ending the Montgomery bus boycott. 1985, a volcanic eruption in Colombia destroyed the town of Armero, killing 25,000 people, the deadliest lahar or mud flow ever. And in 2010, Burmese politician Aung San Suu Kyi was released after 7 years of house arrest. Born this day in 1715 is Dorothy Christiane Erxleben, German doctor. She was the first woman to be licensed to practice medicine. Wow. To 1955, Whoopi Goldberg, Black American actor. She's won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony Award, the EGOT. Next is November 14th, 1883, Ahoy Matey, an adventure novel that popularized treasure hunts and one-legged pirates. Treasure Island by Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson was published for the first time. 1889, From Fiction to Reality. Inspired by a famous novel, trailblazing U.S. journalist Nellie Bly set off from Hoboken Pier in New Jersey to circle the globe in less than 80 days. She achieved her aim with time to spare in 72 days. To 1960, School for All. 6-year-old Black American Ruby Bridges shaped history when she made her way into an all-white elementary school. She became the first Black child to do so in the state of Louisiana. Also on this day, in 1152 BCE, ancient Egyptian laborers walked out of work in the first strike in history. Wow. In 1967, the first Day of the Colombian Woman was celebrated in honor of the independence leader Policarpa Salavarrieta. In 2018, the jewelry of French Queen Marie Antoinette, not seen in public for 200 years, was sold at an auction in Switzerland. Born this day in 1907, Astrid Lindgren, Swedish author. Her children's books have sold millions internationally. And in 1998, Vanessa Hudgens, U.S. actress. She's best known for her role in the High School Musical movies. It's Gabriella. Next is November 15th. 1533, taking over. Spanish conquistador or conqueror Francisco Pizarro entered Cusco, the Inca capital. He soon captured Inca leader Atahualpa, which marked the end of the Inca Empire. He later formed the first Spanish settlement in Peru. 1887, Power Up. The first dry cell battery was patented by German inventor Karl Gassner. A commercial success, it didn't spill its chemicals as previous types did. This reliable battery is similar to the carbon-zinc combination used today. And in 1971, Pioneering Processor. The world's first microprocessor, the Intel 4004, was released in the US. As a crucial building block in electronic devices, it revolutionized the way people used computers. Also on this day in 2001, the gaming console Xbox was first released by Microsoft in the US, changing the world of online gaming. 2010, Al Barak, Morocco's first high-speed train line, was inaugurated, linking the cities of Tangiers and Casablanca. And in 2019, Pakistan became the first country in the world to introduce a vaccine against typhoid. Born this day in 1981 is Lorena Ochoa, Mexican golfer. Considered the best Mexican golfer of all time, she was ranked highest in the world for 158 weeks from 2007 to 2010. Oh my gosh, here we go. Next is November 16th, 1807, Fierce Pirate. When Chinese pirate Zheng Yi died, his wife Qing Shi took command of the Guangdong Pirate Confederation, roaming the South China Sea with up to 80,000 followers. She was the world's most feared pirate. 1974, Space Message. In Puerto Rico, astronomers sent a message into space using the Arecibo radio telescope. It will take almost 25,000 years for the Arecibo message to reach its destination, the M13 star cluster on the edge of our galaxy. And in 1632, Protestant victory. The Battle of Lutzen took place between the Protestant Swedish Empire and the Catholic forces of the Holy Roman Empire. It was a Protestant victory, but Swedish King Gustavus Adolphus was killed in battle. Also on this day in 1879, children took turns to meet Santa Claus at the first ever Santa's Grotto in a shop in Liverpool, UK. 1928, Australian polar explorer Hubert Wilkins and U.S. pilot Carl Ben Eielson made the first powered flight over Antarctica. And in 1965, the first space probe to land on another planet, the Venera 3, left Earth for Venus. Born this day in 1892 is Tazio Nuvolari, Italian racing driver. He won 150 races during his career, including 24 Grand Prix titles. In 1963, Meenakshi Seshadri, Indian actor. She starred in many successful Hindi, Tamil, and Telugu films. Next is November 17th, 2020, whale discovery. While searching for a hard-to-find whale species deep in the waters off the coast of Mexico, unexpected clicking noises led researchers to discover another previously unknown beaked species of whale. 1970, computer mouse. U.S. inventor Douglas Engelbart received a patent for his computer mouse. The handheld device made it possible for a computer user to guide a pointer to different places on a screen. 1869, Suez Canal. The 120-mile-long Suez Canal in Egypt officially opened in front of spectators, with feasts and firework displays. The waterway allows ships to pass between the Mediterranean and Red Seas. Also on this day in 1989, the Velvet Revolution began when students in Prague, Czechoslovakia, which is present-day Czechia, or Prague is in present-day Czechia, gathered to protest against the communist government. In 2003, former bodybuilder and actor Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor of California. And in 2011, Australian scientists found sunken sections of an ancient supercontinent called Gondwana in the Indian Ocean. Born this day in 1944 is Danny DeVito, U.S. screenwriter, actor, and director. He starred in films such as Matilda and Batman Returns. In 1960, Mother RuPaul Charles, Black American drag queen and television star. He presents the globally successful TV show RuPaul's Drag Race. We love RuPaul's channel. Next is November 18th, 1962, the butterfly effect. U.S. mathematician Edward Lorenz wrote a paper that laid the groundwork for a theory that he later called the butterfly effect. It states that small changes, such as the air moved by the flap of a butterfly's wings, can start a chain of events that ends with something big happening, such as a tornado. In 1761, telling time, British inventor John Harrison's M4 marine chronometer finally cracked the longitude problem, the measure for how far east or west you are, after his son William tested the device on a voyage to Jamaica. And in 1916, the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme, one of the major battles of World War I, ended after 140 days. It was one of the deadliest battles ever. More than 3 million soldiers died and about 1 million more were wounded. Also on this day in 1803, Haitian revolutionaries inflicted a huge defeat on their colonial overlords, France. Haiti declared independence the following year. 1910, suffragettes, or women campaigning for the right to vote, were attacked at what the media later called the Black Friday protest. And in 2011, Minecraft was released. It went on to become the biggest selling video game ever. Born this day in 1968, Owen Wilson, U.S. actor. He starred in the Night at the Museum series and voiced Lightning McQueen in the Cars animated films. Next is November 19th, 1863, the Gettysburg Address. As the U.S. Civil War raged, President Abraham Lincoln delivered a short speech in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, that explained the importance of the conflict for the freedom of all Americans. 2017 motorcycle record. The world record for the most people on one moving motorcycle was broken by 58 members of the ASC Tornadoes motorcycle team in Bangalore, India. Surprisingly, no injuries were reported in the record-breaking attempt. 2001, Toilet Day. The first World Toilet Day was held. The day is aimed at bringing international awareness to the fact that billions of people around the world live without hygienic toilets, a massive crisis that can cause serious illnesses. Also on this day, in 1274, the Mongols began their ultimately unsuccessful attempt to conquer Japan. The battles featured an early use of hand-thrown bombs. In 1969, Pelé, the Brazilian soccer star, scored his 1,000th goal on his way to a world record 1,279 goals. In 2018, a 4,000-year-old underground termite city larger than the island of Great Britain was described in a biology publication. Wow. Born this day in 1828 is Lakshmi Bai, Indian queen. She defended her state, Jhansi, against British forces, but was eventually defeated. Next is November 20th. In 2013, Medal of Freedom. Award-winning U.S. activist and journalist Gloria Steinem received the Medal of Freedom from U.S. President Barack Obama in recognition of her role in the women's liberation movement and campaigns for women's rights. In 1866, a whirligig wonder. The patent was granted for the whirligig, better known as the yo-yo. This popular spinning toy was invented by Americans James L. Haven and Charles Hetrick, but basic variations had existed since ancient times. 1886, Sherlock Holmes. A Study in Scarlet, the first book to feature the fictional detective Sherlock Holmes, was accepted by London-based publisher Ward, Lock and Company. British author Arthur Conan Doyle wrote 60 stories featuring this beloved character. Also on this day in 1969, Indigenous American activists gathered on Alcatraz Island, a former U.S. prison base in San Francisco Bay, to protest against their unfair treatment by the U.S. government and demand the return of their former land, including this island. And in 2019, a scientific study based on fossil findings revealed that for 70 million years, prehistoric snake species had lived with back lakes. And born this day in 1889, Edwin Hubble, U.S. astronomer. He discovered galaxies beyond the Milky Way and devised a way to classify them based on their shape. Next is November 21st, 1963 rocket launch. India's first rocket blasted off from the Pumba Equatorial Rocket Launch Station. Supplied by NASA, the Nike Apache sounding rocket, that's what it says, sounding rocket, carried out in-flight experiments, marking the first of the country's space program. I don't know about you guys, but this is making me so sleepy. My vision's starting to blur. Just making sure I'm reading things right. In 2019, shatterproof shocker. Tesla chief executive Elon Musk launched the car company's electric pickup truck, Cybertruck, at a special event in Los Angeles. However, his demonstration did not go according to plan when the vehicle's shatterproof windows smashed on stage. Oh, Elon. And in 1843, vulcanized rubber. British engineer Thomas Hancock patented his invention of tough vulcanized rubber, made by placing natural rubber in molten sulfur. It transformed the automobile industry as tires made of vulcanized rubber could withstand extreme heat and cold, making them last longer. Also on this day in 1783, the first untethered hot air balloon with people on board took off from Paris, France, and flew 5 miles before landing safely. In 2017, cheers greeted the reading aloud of Robert Mugabe's resignation letter in the Zimbabwean parliament after his controversial 37 years as the country's leader. Born this day in 1965, Björk, Icelandic singer and songwriter. She's known for her innovative musical style, which blends influences from many genres. In 1987, Isha Karavati, Indian chess player. She made her mark on the world stage by winning the titles of International Master and Women Grandmaster. Next is November 22nd, 1718, capturing Blackbeard. British Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard and his crew fought the infamous British pirate Blackbeard in an effort to capture him. In the battle, the pirate took 5 musket shots and 20 cuts by sword before he fell. 2005, popular leader. Angela Merkel was sworn in as Germany's first female chancellor. She was re-elected to this position in 2009, 2013, and 2018. And the 1963 national tragedy. As he traveled through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was fatally shot by a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. Also on this day in 1975, Prince Juan Carlos I of the Spanish royal family was declared King of Spain following the death of military dictator Francisco Franco. He transformed Spain into a democracy and later a constitutional monarchy. In 1995, Toy Story, the first feature-length computer-animated film, was released by Walt Disney Pictures and Pixar Animation Studio. And born this day in 1984, Scarlett Johansson, U.S. actor. She's well known for playing Black Widow in the Marvel movies. It is one of the highest-earning female actors of all time. Next is November 23rd, 1976, Deep Dive. French diver Jacques Mayol attempted a free dive from a boat off the coast of the island of Elba, Italy. He was able to reach a depth of 330 feet without any breathing equipment, making him the first diver to achieve this extraordinary feat. My goodness. In 1890, Queen Wilhelmina. When King William III of the Netherlands died without a male heir, a law was passed to allow his daughter, Princess Wilhelmina, to take the throne. She became queen at age 10 and would later keep her country out of World War I. Also on this day in 543 BCE, in ancient Greece, Thespis of Icaria became the first person on record to act as a character in a play on stage. I guess hence the word thespian. 1868, French inventor Louis, hold on, my eyes are so blurry, Louis Ducos du Oron filed a patent for a process that added color to photographs, marking the beginning of color photography. And in 1963, the first episode of the British science fiction TV show Doctor Who went on air. I don't know how you guys are staying awake. I'm struggling. Next is November 24th, 1974, Finding Lucy. U.S. scientists Donald Johanson and Tom Gray discovered the skeleton of Australopithecus afarensis, a human ancestor in Ethiopia. They nicknamed it Lucy after the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. 1971, Icon, parachuting hijacker. A hijacker calling himself Dan Cooper parachuted from a plane over the state of Washington with $200,000 US in ransom money. The mystery of his whereabouts have never been solved. Dan Cooper's story is amazing. Speaking of amazing, it's My Boys, 2020 K-pop sensation. After smashing YouTube records with their hit song Dynamite, achieving 100 million views in one day, Korean sensation BTS became the first K-pop band to receive a Grammy Award nomination. This was a major boost for diversity within the pop music industry. Jungkook's my favorite. Stream his new album. Also on this day in 1859, British biologist Charles Darwin's book On the Origin of Species was published, outlining his groundbreaking theory of evolution. In 1887, Black Beauty, a best-selling novel about a horse by British author Anna Sewell, was published. In 2016, in Colombia, a peace deal was signed between the government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces, ending the country's 50-year-long Civil War. Born this day in 1849 is Frances Hodgson Burnett, British-American novelist and playwright. One of her most popular books is The Secret Garden. Next is November 25th, 2019, jewel theft. Dazzling royal jewelry from one of Europe's finest treasure collections was stolen from the Dresden Greenwald Museum in Germany. The items, said to be worth 1 billion euros, have not been recovered. Wow. 2020, a new species. Scientists discovered a new type of Lorcifera, a microscopic marine invertebrate, in the seas surrounding Japan. Living in the tiny spaces between mud and sand, its head is covered in more than 200 spines. Wow. 2011, skiing solo. British explorer Felicity Aston set out to become the first person to ski alone across Antarctica using only her own muscle power. It took her 59 days to cover a distance of 1,084 miles. Also on this day in 1915, German-born U.S. physicist Albert Einstein announced his theory of general relativity, describing the nature of gravity. The theory states that the bigger an object is, the greater gravitational pull it has. 1975, Suriname gained independence from the Netherlands, becoming the last country in South America to free itself from colonial rule. And born this day in 1914 is Joe DiMaggio, U.S. baseball player. Considered one of the greatest players of all time, he spent his entire 13-year career in Major League Baseball, playing for the New York Yankees. Next is November 26th, 1952, 3D film. Buona Devil, the first feature-length 3D film, was released in the U.S. Audiences wore 3D glasses to see lifelike hungry lions on the loose on the cinema screen. 1789, Thanksgiving holiday. During his presidential speech, George Washington declared a day of public thanksgiving and prayer across the U.S. The Thanksgiving tradition, which began with farming families giving thanks for their annual harvests, became an annual holiday in the U.S., celebrated on the fourth Thursday of November with a feast. 1865, Alice in Wonderland. The children's classic Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by British author Lewis Carroll was published in London, UK. The fictional account of a young girl's experiences in a fantasy world of peculiar characters became an international bestseller. Also on this day in 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter entered Pharaoh Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt, which was full of ancient treasures. 1949, the Constitution of India was adopted, with the country's laws and principles documented in the world's longest written constitution. And in 2008, a series of terrorist attacks began in Mumbai, India, killing 174 people. Born this day in 1922 is Charles M. Schulz, U.S. cartoonist. Nicknamed Sparky, he created the comic strip Peanuts, featuring the beloved characters Charlie Brown and Snoopy the dog. Next is November 27th, 1890, soccer nets. Goal nets for soccer matches were patented by British engineer John Alexander Brodie, making it easier to spot when a goal was scored. In 1891, nets were made compulsory for all league matches. 1939, wartime hero. Despite losing his legs in a plane crash, British Royal Air Force pilot Douglas Bader returned to duty in World War II wearing a pair of prosthetic legs to fly a fighter plane. I'm holding it together. 2015 Circus Festival. The first African Circus Arts Festival opened in Ethiopia. More than 100 artists from around the continent showcased their talents to visitors who were given free entry. The festival helped promote the circus arts in Africa. Also on this day in 1924, the first annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade took place in New York City. I always watch the parade every year. 2013, Disney's fantasy film Frozen was released to packed cinemas, becoming one of the highest-earning animated films of all time. In 2019, the president of Ghana gave 126 people Ghanaian citizenship to commemorate the 400-year anniversary of the first enslaved people from Africa landing in Jamestown, Virginia. And born this day in 1701, Anders Celsius, Swedish astronomer. He built the Uppsala Astronomical Observatory in Uppsala, Sweden, and invented the Celsius temperature scale. In 1940, Li Junfan, Chinese-American martial artist, better known as Bruce Lee. He starred in about 30 films, bringing kung fu to the masses. Next is November 28th, 1862, Notts County FC. The world's first professional soccer team, Notts County Football Club, was founded in Nottingham, UK. With their black and white striped uniform, they have been nicknamed the Magpies. 1967, Pulsar discovery. Astrophysicist Jocelyn Bell Burnell from Northern Ireland discovered the first pulsar in space, a very small, very dense, fast spinning star that emits regular beams of radiation like a flashing lighthouse. 1893, women at the polls. In New Zealand, 90,290 women lined up to cast their ballot in the country's national election. New Zealand was the first country in the world to grant all women the right to vote, following years of campaigning. Also on this day in 1814, a steam-powered printing press was used to print a newspaper for the first time. The press was designed by German engineers. In 1895, the first U.S. automobile race was won by engineer Frank Duryea in about 10 hours. And in 2012, a film adaptation for the first part of J.R. Tolkien's classic fantasy novel The Hobbit was released in cinemas. Born this day in 1943 is Randy Newman, U.S. composer. He created the music for many of Pixar's animated films, such as Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. Next is November 29th, 1972, the birth of video gaming. Let me adjust my headphones real quick. Okay. Inspired by table tennis, the first commercial hit arcade game, Pong, was launched by U.S. video game company Atari. Players competed by knocking a ball, which was a dot, back and forth using a paddle, which was a line. They won points when their opponent missed. In 1935, Schrodinger's famous cat. Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger published his thought experiment about a cat in a box with radioactive material, arguing that it's impossible to know if the cat is alive, dead, or both if you can't see it. To 1929 South Pole flight. Richard E. Byrd, a U.S. Navy admiral, and his crew of 3 became the first to fly over the South Pole. The round trip, setting out from their base on Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, took just over 17 hours. Also on this day in 1947, the United Nations voted to separate Palestine into an Arab state and a Jewish one called Israel, despite protests by Arab countries. 1949, New Zealand's first female Maori Member of Parliament. Goodness, make sure I get her name right. Iriaka Ratana was selected. I'm so sleepy. 1988, a record-breaking ensemble of 1,013 cello players came together in Kobe, Japan, to perform at the first concert of 1,000 cellists. They had just over 1,000. And lastly, we have November 30th, 2017, Over the Rainbow. Students from the Chinese Culture University in Taiwan witnessed the longest lasting rainbow on record. The keen observers produced more than 10,000 images to prove that it lasted exactly 8 hours and 58 minutes. Oh, I couldn't hold on for 2 more minutes. 1872 Global Kickoff. The first official international soccer game was played on a cricket ground in Glasgow, Scotland. The England versus Scotland match was watched by 4,000 spectators and ended in a draw. Also on this day in 1803, the Balmis Expedition, a Spanish healthcare mission, set off to vaccinate millions of people around the world against smallpox. 1954, Anne Hodges was hit by a meteorite when it crashed into her home in Alabama. She walked away with just bruises. And in 2006, South Africa became the first country in Africa to legalize same-sex marriage when the Civil Union Act of 2006 came into effect. And born this day in 1874, Winston Churchill, British politician. He led the UK as Prime Minister in World War II. And in 1924, Shirley Chisholm, Black American politician. In 1968, she became the first Black woman to join the U.S. Congress. And that is it for tonight. I'm going to bed. I hope you're sleepy too. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good